Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Great. We got the perfect time slot. The last day of the conference, right after lunch, right after the day after a party at a nightclub. But I'm still impressed you're all here, so thanks for coming. I'm Ed Jamieson. I'm VP of Global Sales at Helpshift. Exciting to be here. In preparation for this session is called The Art of a Successful Game Launch. You know, in the last week preparing for this and kind of honing in on the fine details, it occurred to me that this should probably be called the art of launching and scaling a successful game, because many of the things we're going to talk about today are about anticipation, thinking ahead, preparation, and putting in the right infrastructure for when you launch and all that hard work that you've put in, and your customers love what you've done and they love your product, then you need to be really ready to scale. And so if you're here, regardless of where you are in your dev cycle, this is relevant to you, because the things that you're thinking about early on are also the things that we'll discuss with you today are going to prepare you for when your game goes viral and when you scale, and that's why you're all in this industry. So with me, I've got Syed from Backtrace, and I'll let him introduce himself and talk about Backtrace. Eric Vermillion, CEO of Helpshift, and Peter Gerson representing Keywords. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. They're going to tell them about their role, but also a little bit about the company. Oz?
Yeah, hello everyone. My name is Oz, so I'm a game dev evangelist at Backtrace. So at Backtrace, we provide an error and crash reporting monitoring solution, which helps you in the games to basically detect errors before your users do. So pretty much we support every game engine, major game engine, every programming language, every platform, and we are the only ones out there that actually support all platforms and to this basically PS4, PS5, Xbox as well. So we'll speak more about our product as we go along.
Hi, I'm Eric Vermillion. I'm the CEO of Helpshift. I'm based in the United States in Dallas, Texas. Helpshift is a player support platform that sits on over 2,000 games around the world. Our SDK sits on about 4 billion mobile devices, so we help literally billions of players get help when they need it, both in games as well as other apps. Our business has been around for 10 years, very much primarily focused on the gaming industry. About 80% of our customers are in the gaming industry. We do have some other customers in fintech and other industries that want to grow up someday and be like gaming, but gaming very much represent our thought leadership segment of our customer base, and I'm grateful that all of you made it here to listen to us today, so thank you.
So my name's Peter. I'm wearing two hats today because my colleague Dominick couldn't make it, and he sends his regards, but had an emergency and had to stay home. Luckily, he's part of the Keywords family. The company he would be here talking about is KantanAI, which is a machine translation company and one of the key players in how we help you scale and go live. And so on the machine translation part, they help with tons of things like automating the localization, and within game, translating various languages into English or any language you need, so that the agents in their native language can respond really quickly and give back a translated answer to the player, so they receive something they understand. Within the Keywords family, we have 7 lines of business, scaling around 11,000 people in the world, and we are literally the largest studio for hire people across any of the disciplines. I won't drill into that too much, but please come see us at our booth and I can talk to you about that at length. My responsibility is solutions all around the support services or live ops. So community, social, trust and safety, moderation, and of course player support. And I'm here to talk to you about that today. Thanks.
All right, we're going to get into the discussions. You might be wondering, why are we all here together? At the end of the day, we're partners. We work well together, and we all provide key components to make mobile games successful. So we work really closely together. We've been doing this for a few years, and that's why we're here sponsoring together, and that's why we put this session together. First question goes to Eric. What are some things you need to be thinking about to provide that flawless in-game user experience?
All right, raise your hand if you've made a flawless game. So, hey, look, I think the answer, Ed, is that it's impossible to make a flawless game. But, you know, even if you did succeed in technically making a flawless game, particularly when it comes to that support aspect of it, consumers, players are very, very finicky. They're very, they have differing degrees of needs and wants and desires, and it's really important that obviously you try and create an incredible experience, immersive experience for them in the game, but you also think about the questions that they're going to ask you and how will they ask you those questions later. I think it's very easy for us to try and launch the perfect game based on the player experience in the game and kind of forget about the fact that they're going to need help with things, or there might be crashes, or there might be technical issues that they need help with. And so thinking about how do you create a mechanism for them to engage with you as they have challenges, as they need your help, and to provide that outreach and not let yourself get caught off guard later in the game. It's very important that you think about that up front and early as you're designing the game.
Thanks, Eric. Peter, from the keywords perspective, if you want to give that a go, please.
Yeah, to basically, when Ed asks us these questions, you kind of think, like, where do we come up with the answers? And the bottom line is really, in the modern shift across all platforms, not just in mobile, the move to get to market more quickly with what is a viable product that people will play is what's really driving the industry, and then there's iteration. And quite often, people think that when you're iterating, you can make the changes. And actually, it's kind of, think counterintuitively, the more you can make the game playable, ready, and have the platforms built in the game, the more you can launch and scale. And that's kind of the approach we try to take and work with our customers together as a team, is plan ahead and be prepared. You're not sure day one how many people are going to download and play the game. You don't know what your daily active users are going to be, and you don't know what issues are going to come up across all the versions or platforms that are out there of software that the game runs on, the kind of store reviews you're going to get. So from a machine translation point of view and from a planning of a platform to manage issues, the community and where your community is going to meet, plan well early in the design phase and set these things in place. You don't have to hire people straight away, but you need to have, what will the outcome be date one? What are we trying to achieve for our players? Because at the end of the day, that's who pays the bills. We're all here to keep the players happy, and if the players are happy and they're playing in the game, they stay longer, they spend more, and they bring other players to the game. So if that's the outcome, where and when do you need to plan so that you can add or scale the services you need? And that's kind of where we like to get engaged as early as possible. Quite often I say the word player support or machine translation. Yeah, well, once we've scaled to 500,000 users, maybe we'll need support. Try testing systems when 500,000 users are playing and shouting at you. Kind of makes the point, right?
Great, thank you. Oz, slight variation on the question. How do you provide an uninterrupted game playing experience?
Yeah, so I have a little acronym for that. So instead of SOS, I have what is SAS. So stability, ability, and scalability. So in terms of stability, it's really important for apps because surveys have shown that users will stop playing a game if it's problematic, and they don't even open that. Like if it's like going to be a problematic app, they don't try it more than 3 times. And if they are to encounter errors, crashes, and bugs, they would stop playing altogether at some point. So it is really important that therefore you have you build a game that's stable enough, and that leads me to the second point, ability. So does your game have the ability to actually monitor the health of the game that you've developed? So what's the status like? Do you actually have errors coming up? Do you know if a game is crashing at some point when you're playing? Maybe there's this particular level that you're into, and then the game is crashing. So maybe the users are not going beyond that point. So you want that ability to monitor and to find out the health of your game at any point. So the third point is scalability. So the idea of launching a game is that ultimately you want to actually grow to a point where you can attract lots of users, right? So you want to scale up, and in doing so, do you have the right tools to provide a seamless scalability solution? So the tools that you are incorporating in your game is really important. They need to support the scalability. So these are the three factors I would say to have uninterrupted gameplay as well. So I will speak more about that actually further about how our tool Backtrace helps you in achieving that.
Okay. And Peter, you spoke from both the Kantan perspective and player support already, so we can go on to the next one, or do you want to add one more comment?
We're okay to move on.
Okay, great. All right, so next question, we're going to start out with Eric. Best practices and learnings around feedback and player support to successfully launch a game. Best practices and learnings.
Yeah, I think a lot of times when we go through a game launch, we're having focus groups and we're doing soft launch and we're asking friends and family to play the games and we're trying to collect information on the game itself. But once it gets into a more full-scale launch, that feedback is often lost. That opportunity to collect that feedback is often lost. It's very important that as you're designing the game, you take advantage of the feedback mechanisms that are out there. Helpshift provides a feedback tool. Many of you may not know this. We've actually got a free version of our platform that allows you to collect feedback from right within the game, so that your developers can hear that feedback on stability issues or playability issues, and it's just embedded right there in the game. Very easy for you to collect that feedback. It should also be an ongoing exercise in collecting that feedback as the game is in full launch and starts to scale up, because your players are telling you as they're playing what they like and don't like. You've got a great opportunity to really collect that information kind of at that moment of truth and in an ongoing basis from them. So it's very important that you think about how to collect that feedback as you're designing the game, and tools like Helpshift give you the opportunity to really do that in a very intuitive and easy way.
Peter, best practices and learnings with regards to player engagement.
We often are on the front end of the process with the human touch, and want to make sure that people don't get into these deadly loops of bot cycles or find that it's frustrating or have to repeat themselves. And the best advice we can give, again, it's about planning and understanding and building the system to be scalable. So as Eric pointed out about feedback and the tool to capture the feedback, just getting some feedback, what do you do with it? It's quantitative and it's qualitative. So start to learn what sort of categories you need to track and tag correctly. And then it's spending some time training the people who get the feedback, which is usually the agent group, on how to tag correctly, so it makes it a lot more useful to be able to track this data over time. So that's one of the things, is spending the time training people about the value of the feedback. The other thing is, don't ignore. Quite a lot of the time, what is being reported by the players isn't what the real issue is or the real frustration is. Some root cause analysis is really needed to understand what is driving the frustration or driving the issues. And the people usually best suited to that over time is the feedback that comes actually from the agent group as well as the players. Because the agents themselves are seeing trends or seeing process or seeing the same kind of frustrations come and can identify what the root cause is rather than the complaint itself. And it's tracking those into systems at the back end and making sure that they're reportable on that makes the difference, and kind of why you need to invest in the systems and plan ahead of time.
Peter, we're going to stay with you for one more, and then we're going to come to Oz. Best practices and learnings with regards to language translation.
Superb. So if you're going to globalize and put 9 languages out there, again, it's about outcomes. What are you trying to achieve? And as long as you're transparent with your player group, and it's about speed of response to solving their problem. So if you have the game translated, for example, into Arabic, French, and Turkish, you should be able to provide some sort of support, or at least a transparent process of how you'll manage the support for those players. You and I know both that learning a new language, you listen first and understand a lot more, then you start to speak. The final step of reading and writing particularly, is the hardest piece, especially to express yourselves. So if you only give support in English, but you globalize to 9 languages, and you expect the other 8 languages to ask their questions in English, you're really stopping the flow of information. So find a way in using the tools that are available today to at least accommodate them being able to write in their own language to you, because most of the ticketing systems are going to use some kind of asynchronous chat, a la Helpshift, which is really a cool system, or good old-fashioned email. But yeah, if that's what it is, that's what it is. And that has to now be come in and dealt with by an agent who has to respond. So a translation tool and best practices will help you manage that expectation and get a far better result for the players, rather than, okay, well, we do 9 languages in the game, but hey, if you want to talk to us, you get one choice.
Thank you, Peter. Automated error and crash reporting. Talk to us about learnings and best practices, Oz.
Yeah, so number one thing that I learned even during my development journey is don't reinvent the wheel. So if there are tools already in the market that can do the work that you want to do in-house. Like a lot of times, like I've come across developers saying, hey, I'm going to write a solution to actually capture errors and upload the logs and all of that. And then they come across and say, hey, we can't do this. I mean, there are things that have to be done manually. So, but you don't have to waste your time and effort in reinventing the wheel. So there are companies like Backtrace, for example, where we've spent years developing a robust product. So companies like Helpshift doing what they do with player feedback. So all of us, like all of the companies in the panel, so we have been investing a lot of resources in developing the tool. So you use that instead of reinventing it. So if you're using like Unity, for example, so a lot of times we go to asset store and download the assets instead of like creating ourselves, like if there is something available, right? So same thing applies for any middleware tool. So you just use what is already there and make your game better, spend time on developing the game rather than developing tools.
Thanks, Oz. Eric, next question is for you. Launching a game takes a lot of cross-functional and team, a lot of team collaboration. How does Helpshift enable or support that cross-functional team to deliver a successful game?
Well, I think Helpshift is going to be the place that your customers have this continuous engagement where they share with you what they like and they don't like, ask for help along the way as they're playing your games. And so there is just a tremendous amount of insight in that information, things that are going to help marketing with retention strategies or monetization strategies, things that are going to help with designs or thoughts for future game design or future iterations of the same game. So there's a lot of information that you're going to be able to gather as your players come to you and say, this is what I really like about your game, this is what I don't like about your game, or this is where I continue to have challenges with the game. Being able to think through what all of the stakeholders that can use that information want out of it later on is going to help you better design the right player experience for it. So again, I can't stress this enough. Support is the thing that gets forgotten the most in game development. It's an afterthought, and as Peter said, when you have a line of 50,000 players that are coming to you with something that's a problem for them at the same time, that is not the time to figure out your support strategy. So begin with the end in mind and think through what you want that player experience to be when they do have challenges with the game, and how all of the stakeholders in the organization can benefit from the data that you're going to inherently receive from all those customers telling you what they love about your game or don't love so much about your game.
Peter, talk to us a little bit about the importance of human touch in this conversation.
So the first thing I wanted to say around that is, again, around the planning of the process. It takes time for anybody to know the game as well as your developers or the process you're putting out. You've lived, breathed, brought this baby to life, and it's now out there and it's living. Day one, it's impossible for any other human to have that same passion and the same understanding. So people need time. So agents are humans too, and agents need the time, they need the training, and they need the help or the assistance of a system to be able to do what you don't. And also, again, it sounds like we're always selling things and you should have other people. No. The idea is that the core responsibility and the core capability sits with what you're doing. But see teams like Helpshift, Backtrace, Keywords, and others as an extension of that voice and brand. We work with you. We're not there to replace. It's not one or the other. Keep everything in-house or outsource. It's a combination. And so when you're doing that combination, you need to plan for that in terms of having the agents ready. So that's the first aspect. It takes them time to become game masters and help represent the voice and the brand. The more we can make that as easy as possible to them by planning and setting the system up, the better. When then the players come in, you will see the difference in the human touch, because then it's not this robotic matrix quick thing, as quick as possible, get them off the system, give them an answer and move on. The engagement of the agents means that that flows through to the engagement of the players, and the players then feel they're cared for and taken care of because the brand and the game is passionately delivered or supported by the players. So that's where we see a major difference in how you can engage. Whether it's in-house or out, the team that's going to be player-facing needs to buy and have that fire and that passion, and then bring that over to the players so the players are engaged. Community particularly is an area to focus on in being proactive and outwardly managing and not waiting for them to come to talk to you in an area where you can really, really engage across all languages, ages, sizes, anyone playing the game, if that makes sense.
Okay, Oz. What issues does Backtrace help mobile game developers address?
Yeah, good point, Ed. So all of you have played games, right? So have you encountered a game where you might have been at a critical stage and boom, game crashed, or you got a bug, you can't go beyond that? So these are the things that we address. So we help you to actually collect all of those errors, bugs, crashes, whatever happens in your game, and send it to the backend. So the developers can look at it in real time as the games are being played on the devices. They can see what's happening with the game, the health of the game, and then if there is an error, they actually can get started working on it and resolving it even before more users get impacted. So on mobile devices, we actually can also address application not responding, that is crashes, in other words, then out-of-memory exceptions, which is really critical for mobile devices. So we help in detecting those. We can also attach automatically screenshots of the game at the point when the crash or the error happened. So in addition to that, we can also we have a beautiful regression feature. So let's say you fixed an error at some point, and a couple of versions later, the same error came up again. So our software can detect that and then open that previous ticket. Jira, we have a Jira integration, by the way, as well. So can open the previous ticket and notify all of those stakeholders that, oh, this was an error, and then you got to fix that, and you show the entire history of the error. So basically, these are the key points for mobile devices, especially for our product. Yeah.
Thank you. Peter, let's talk to us a little bit about localization. When do companies consider this? Why do they consider it, and what's their strategy?
So I just wanted to preface that by saying most of the answers all of us on the panel have spoken about usually is a 90-second bite. And we're here, come and talk to us in more detail if any of these subjects you need some more information. It's very hard to really give you the art of anything in 90 seconds. We can just plant the seed or the idea. And I know I'm taking quite a bit of the 90 seconds to say that, but that's my point. Localization may be something that you don't have to do instantly. It may be for later versions. It may be that when you know, it's all about resources. it really comes down to who you think will play the game. It's not necessary to localize into all languages if you're not going to actually have players in those regions from a geographical or cultural reason play the game. But if it is suited to a geographical or cultural reason, you should be looking at localization as part of the development cycle. And usually there's a create phase, then there's a globalize phase, and then there's an engage phase. And the engage phase is what we're talking about today. You plan that before you engage. So in the create phase, you need to be thinking about your globalize phase of when you'll localize a game, into which languages, and why it makes sense to do so. And those kind of discussions are way beyond a 90-second bite. It's the same for machine translation. Will you use that to do some of the localization? Will you use voice actors? How will you go about it? There are a number of ways. So those complexities we really want to talk to you about in detail and take the time. Last thing I want to do is a shameless plug. We have an Oculus to give away at our stand. It's got to go today. You've got to come and scan the QR code to win the Oculus. So take advantage, come talk to us at the stand, and then scan for the Oculus.
Thank you. I put my name in 10 times for the Oculus, so. All right. But I'm disqualified, I know that. Even if my name were picked, I'm out. So, Eric, let's, everyone who's launching a game is thinking about cost. And you're also trying to do it, efficiently. We know how often games get pushed off and pushed off. We certainly know that at Helpshift because a lot of what we do ties to a game launch and helping support that. But Eric, talk to us about Helpshift might support gaming companies and gaming studios, reduce costs and improve efficiencies.
Yeah, sure. And I think a lot of times people think about reduce cost and drive efficiency and automation. They think a lot about, well, that means that I need less people, or people are going to lose their jobs, or things like that. That is not at all the case. What happens when you launch a game, especially if it's a successful game launch, as we're talking today, is there are huge spikes in volume that happen very, very quickly. And it's impossible to manage those unless you come up with a way to let the technology do it for you. And so a logical support journey for gaming, for players, for modern consumers, is one that involves self-service, heavy self-service. We've got a great case study on our website from Wildlife Studios, where they were able to automate over 90% of their customer issues. And what that means is that the really simple things that consumers want, that players want to do themselves, can be quickly achieved. But if they're a top-tier player, if they're somebody that's having a more complex issue, allowing them to get to a customer service person, to a live agent that can actually help, that's in a much better position to help them at that point, provide a much higher level of service for them, because all of the simple things have already been taken care of by the bots and automation and some of the FAQs early on. It provides the experience that modern consumers and players in the gaming world in particular expect. There's like I said, please check out the case study on our website. There's a bunch of them there that talk about those types of things.
I might throw my 2 cents in here for 30 seconds. Helpshift, we didn't start as a gaming vertical focused company. Gaming chose us, and they chose us because they embrace automation and they embrace what we do, and it's a very want now. And help me stay in the game, help me play the game, help me enjoy my experience, and don't disrupt it. And certainly don't send me out of the game to get help. And that's why the gaming community has embraced our technology and what we do. I'll move on to Backtrace now. Same question. How does Backtrace support cost and efficiencies when launching and supporting games?
Yeah, so Ed, you mentioned about how Helpshift was embraced by the game community, or game studio. So same story with Backtrace as well. So we started off in non-gaming space, and we were embraced by the game studio. So today, we have like 17 of the top 25 game studios using Backtrace. So that speaks a lot about like how we can actually optimize their process, the workflow, and we are saving them millions of dollars. So we have one example of Roblox. So before we came on board, they had 65 million MAU, monthly active users, and after they actually took us on board and started using us to handle millions of incoming crashes that they were getting. So they grew their user base to 100 million. So that's one example. The other example is with Halfbrick. So if you're familiar with Fruit Ninja, so they are the makers. The Halfbrick is basically the developer of Fruit Ninja. So with them, what they used to do was before using Backtrace, they had to manually reproduce all of the error crash reports, and they had to contact users to collect those and submit it manually. And they had to spend like over half a day to just reproduce that bug, playing it. So with Backtrace integrated into their game, ultimately what happened was all of this was automated, and they were able to collect this automatically. And imagine a small team, when you actually make these processes efficient, so you can save a lot of money. So that's exactly what we're doing every day with every new game studios that are coming on board.
Thank you. Not everything can be automated, although we would love that. And Peter, at Keywords, where do agents fit into this and fill the void? And how do they help provide an outstanding game experience? And when do they do so?
Again, every single game is different and every single genre is different. And it really comes down to thinking about what outcome or how you want your player experience to be and planning for that. So it sounds like a stuck record, but agents are only going to be as good as we empower them to be. And where I think a lot of the time is that we often see agents as just this thing at the end of this production chain, and they just send someone an email and solve the problem. And looking at what we have on the stage today is where automation can give people self-help and give them choices. That's fantastic. But there are times when people just want help and they want to talk to a human. And you know what the funny thing is? We never know when that is. Only they do. And that's when they decide. And so you have to try and plan that your system seamlessly or easily allows someone to jump from this self-help environment or this auto environment into reaching out. And that's when the value comes in. And if the agents are empowered, well-trained, and they're confident, that human touch adds huge value. So we spend a lot of time looking for the right profile. It's people who are passionate about games, people who really want to help people. They want to gain them entry to the games industry. And all over the world, with the recruiting system we have, those are the kinds of people we bring in. And we try and look, we don't consider it an entry-level job. We try and make it a career for them. So coming into gaming is exciting and they stay. And we can see against industry standards around the world of people who do what we call business process outsourcing, BPOs. Our attrition rate and the people that stay within gaming in player support is way higher than people stay in contact centers, for example, insurance or telephone or law or health care. They have a much higher churn of people. So it's about the people being happy, helping players to remain happy. That training and that piece is where we see the human touch making a huge difference.
Peter, staying with you, there are obviously hundreds of languages spoken across the globe. You know, how do successful gaming companies pick these languages to launch, and what are some of the considerations that they need to consider when launching?
Rule of thumb, and it again depends where geographically and culturally you're going to launch your game. So there are large markets. For example, Brazilian Portuguese is different to European Portuguese. If you're going to put a mobile game into the Brazil market, which is a very big, very booming and very focused mobile market, best you have Brazilian Portuguese and not take a shortcut if you're based in Europe and use a Portuguese translation from based in Lisbon, for example. So the decisions need to be logical and make common sense. It doesn't make sense, for example, quite honestly, to do Dutch or some of the Nordic languages. They're not large populations, they're highly skilled in English, they're very advanced game players, and they actually prefer to deal in English most of the time. in the gaming community. That's our experience. So to spend money and to put money into translating games into some of those languages doesn't make sense. Yet people say, well, they might be insulted because their language is not represented. No, gamers don't care. They want to have the experience, and if they're happy to have experience. But take games like in a Chinese environment or perhaps Korean, you need to have your game translated and culturally adapted, not just a straight translation. It genuinely needs to be culturally adapted. Otherwise, you have very little chance of success. And you see it all the time when major corporations on either side of the world, publishers, bring a game that's really successful, perhaps in North America, and fail miserably in the Asia-Pacific region, and vice versa. It comes down to planning these things and thinking about these things. It makes a big difference to culturally have your game ready, not just have it language ready.
Thanks, Peter. We interrupt this program to give a shout out to my customers here with huge, wearing the big, huge sweatshirts. I just noticed you guys all in the front row. Thanks for coming. Had to spice it up a little bit here. Eric, this is how do we tie these things together? I mentioned that we're all partners. What are the synergies between the different services and products that we're representing here?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Ed. You all have a really hard job, and I don't envy that, and I don't take that lightly. And you have to think about design and playability and usability and monetization and stability and support. Lots of different things. And there are obviously lots of different vendors out there that will try and convince you that their thing is the most important thing. Like, we think support's the most important thing. The reality is, if you don't get all those things right, it's a recipe for failure of the game. So, Peter mentioned engagement. Part of what we're trying to convey here is that engagement of your consumers is very, very important. Whether you're trying to think about crash testing and analytics of the game and taking that feedback directly from a tool like Backtrace and leveraging Helpshift to recognize those problems before they become lost players or negative reviews in the asset store. Backtrace and Helpshift are actually the #1 and 2 verified solution partners in the VSP program with Unity. Peter mentioned Brazilian Portuguese and other languages that you need to be able to provide support in. Part of that engagement is thinking globally and planning for a very successful launch of the game, and obviously the people that need to be behind that, the support agents, and being able to scale very, very quickly around the globe in a 24/7 environment, and really have that kind of end-to-end start-to-finish development cycle is something that Keywords excels in, and obviously we're very passionate about the player support aspect of it. All of these things are really important as you think about how do you plan for a successful launch, how do you plan for that top title that you're going to launch, and all of the player engagement that's going to happen as part of that. So that's why we're here, and that's why we're doing this together, to try and create some thought leadership around the entire life cycle, or the entire engagement cycle, if you will.
Okay, we've got 2 minutes, and I'm going to give you a quick question. If you could do it in a minute. I also want to hear from Eric, and also allow Peter to answer this. How easy is it to put Backtrace into a game? And then same thing for Helpshift. I know we didn't plan that, but I'm going to throw it at you guys anyway, because we're at that point. Well, let's talk about the next step, and that's execution. Go.
Yeah, so a good question. So it's really a straightforward process. So we offer a free dev tier. So you could go on to our website, sign up for an account. Free dev tier is where you start off. And once you sign up for the account, so we have like easy to access integration guides for the chosen game engine. For example, if you're using Unity or Unreal, so you have the integration guide. So you download the SDK, and with a couple of steps, you're up and running. So you start reporting the errors into the dashboard in Backtrace, and you can get really started with our help guides and all of that. So even for the indie developers, I'd like to add that we actually have the 25,000 per month errors is the limit for the free dev tier. But our hope is that as you grow bigger, you would end up like paying for the paid version. So we want to support that scalability, and we have that option there because we support smaller companies to the big ones. Roblox, for example, like we have like millions of incoming crashes. So we support products where at the launch time, like you would actually see a spike in the incoming crashes. So we have that ability and we want to grow with you. So if you're an indie developer as well, so do give us a try. And we have a booth there. So if you want to try looking at the demo of how easy it is to integrate Backtrace, please drop by and we'll show you.
Eric?
Actually, I'm afraid I think I'm going to have to call it a time there because we've got to keep to time. Thank you very much. One of the things I'd just like to add to this is I think a lot of the teams that I see haven't thought about some of the key areas. And I think you guys have touched on some really important stuff around triage, understanding not just the trace and track, but how do you actually work out from that community what's going wrong in your game through data and through interaction. I think understanding how you use that, how you set that up properly is essential for any team. You can tell the difference between teams that have done it before and teams that haven't because they prep for that, as I think, Peter, you said it, they prep for that at the start, during that creation process. So I'm going to thank you guys very much for your panel, and then we'll bring Jan from Pixel Federation up. So round of applause for the guys.